and let's do some questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Adam. Need to get the chat up here. So your first question is, do you count net carbs or total carbs? Do you think net carbs are a reliable way to manage carb intake? I hear this a lot. What do you think?
I don't pay attention to it.
Yeah, because I've heard people say subtract all the fiber or subtract 50% of the fiber. And it's like, I don't teach that because it would drive my patients nuts.
Yeah, I pay zero attention to it. What I do try to do, I try to eat foods where a higher percentage of the carbs are from fiber. So, just by looking at nutrition facts labels, like if I see a food that's, 20 grams of carbs and 1 gram of fiber versus, 20 grams of carbs and 12 grams of fiber, like I just know immediately in my head, like those are going to result in very different spikeage of glucose. And so that's kind of the metric I pay attention to is upping that fiber as a percentage of the carbs, but I don't mess around with counting and focusing between them.
So when you eat your chia pudding,
yeah,
do you count the carbs in those chia seeds? Because there's a few carbs, but they're all fiber.
Yeah, I would. It's funny because I don't do a lot of carb counting, even though like I say, oh, eat less than 30 grams at a time. What I ended up doing is I just know like certain meals need certain doses, and so I just know like chia pudding is like a 1 or 2 unit meal depending on like the other context on that day. If I'm about to eat it and my blood sugar is rising, I know that's going to be, a 2-uniter. And so I think because I tend to eat like the same 30 things, I just kind of have a sense of what dose things require. Mm-hmm. And that works pretty well, actually. And there's some meals, like I eat sushi, like once or twice a month. And sushi's a disaster every time. It's a complete, utter disaster. I can never get the dosing right. White rice, high fat, lots of protein, forget it. So, I wear a closed loop system and it still doesn't matter. I just like bomb sushi every time, but I kind of know that. And it's just like, I love sushi. I'm going to eat it once or twice a month and I'm just going to deal with the consequences. And that works okay.
Okay, next question. Do you have any thoughts on these strategies for people who have a tendency toward disordered eating or any other situations in which having this much data might not always be helpful? Like, for our eating disordered.
Yeah.
And I work with kids and I've seen a few eating disordered kids with type 1 diabetes. Yeah. I think that's like a minefield.
Totally. I totally agree with you. Yeah. And I think especially with this rise of fasting, like, let me just fast for extremely long periods of time without any medical supervision. I think it does make me super nervous. And it's funny though. I mean, where do we draw the line on what is disordered eating and what is healthy? Because almost everyone with type 1 diabetes has some form of disordered eating, because like who sits down to eat and does like a mental calculation of what's going on and is super attentive. So I think just living with this disease like sort of brings that out. Mm-hmm. But like everything in psychology, there's a spectrum of things. And I think it comes down to like, is this impairing someone's life or is it enhancing their life? So for me, low carb actually opens my life. It empowers me. It frees me up to do things. That doesn't have the flavor of disordered eating.
No.
Whereas for someone who feels imprisoned and shackled by it and locked down by it, totally different story. Yeah, let's get away from restrictiveness. That's not helpful. Yeah.
Okay. My coworker dietitian is very against low carb eating, feels you shouldn't count veggies as carb content, only starchy foods. So if you would eat a protein plus a salad, she would consider that as 0 carbs versus maybe 10 or 15. Would you agree?
Interesting. I think this is a little bit feels like old school non-CGM based thinking, because it doesn't matter what, these are just discrete categories we've created to name things. But what we're really after is like, how does this thing impact glucose, and how do I match insulin to the profile of that? And so I'll tell you, I've eaten veggie and protein thousands of times. It's not zero glucose impact. It does raise your blood sugar. So for something like that, I would take 1 or 2 units. And I just know over time, like, that is what, so to me, it's more about personalizing nutrition, using CGM data with expertise, and helping people learn, like, what dose do I need to match to this meal's glycemic profile? And I'm just not interested in, well, is this a carb or is it not? Like, I don't think it matters. What matters is, like, are people getting good outcomes? Is their blood sugar in range? And are they able to live their life?
Yeah. Well, I had a lady once who was eating like 3 cups of broccoli with her protein for dinner, and she didn't think she needed to count that at all. I said, well, that is giving you some carbs. And so we looked at the carbs in broccoli, and she was getting 30 grams of carbs from broccoli. And it's like, that's great that you're doing that. But you still need to dose your insulin.
Super.
And so that was it.
Yeah. And to me, like, 30 grams of carbs from broccoli is better than 30 grams from white rice. And I just know, for most people, at least for me, it's hard to take insulin 30 minutes before I eat. That's just like an undoable thing in my life. And so I'm just going to choose foods where I don't have to do that.
Yeah. So the next question is, the 42 plus factors that affect blood glucose, is that chart copyrighted?
No,
it's in your book, right?
Yep. It's funny. The book is only has the 22 because it was written 4 years ago.
Right.
But yeah, the link is in the slide. So diatribe.org/42 factors poster.
Yeah.
You can download the full high-res poster, and that is so high-res that you could print it out on a full, monster poster. Diatribe.org/42 factors explained has a whole PDF with all of it listed out. And yeah, steal it, take it. I don't care. As long as it helps people, print it out. You can buy a poster, and that's at shopdiatribe.org. And yeah, go for it.
Thank you. So the next question is, your data is amazing. Do you ever take a vacation from your diabetes?
Oh, it's so funny. This is like the second time I've gotten this question in 3 weeks. That's why I do this approach, because it doesn't take a lot of work. It's like so little work, because I do wear closed loop. By the way, closed loop has really improved my time in like 70 to 140, but it hasn't changed the kind of 70 to 180, which is what I showed in all of those charts. So if you're thinking like, oh, he's cheating and using closed loop, I mean, it's tightened things a little bit, but I think that's the beauty of this approach, is that for me, it's much less work. So diabetes takes up like a tiny fraction of my life, because I've just got to kind of figured out a system that I can stick to and work. So taking a vacation would actually make my life more difficult. Like when I take a food vacation and eat sushi, like, there are trade-offs to that, I feel kind of terrible for a few hours. So it's almost like a self-perpetuating system. Like, the more I stick to it, the better things go, and that makes me want to stick to it more.
Okay, I have a question. You were a kid when you were diagnosed, right?
12.
And so 12, you were right entering the abyss of adolescence.
Yeah.
So how did you deal with your diabetes through your teenage years?
Yeah. I would say I was pretty average. Like, my A1C was kind of in the 8 to 9% range. Yeah. And I think, I ate a typical teenage diet. No CGM, no closed loop,
right?
Quarterly endo appointments, finger stick logs were handwritten, 4 finger sticks per day. I mean, I think it's hard to do better than that with that set of tools.
Yeah.
And no one sort of told us about these other options. So So I think that's kind of how things went. Yeah.
So do you have any thoughts or experience for guiding people out of the all or nothing mentality?
Yeah. I mean, there's a ton in cognitive behavioral therapy just about cognitive distortions and how to help people think of in-betweens. And so I would look into CBT. There's lots of great books on CBT. I'm trying to see if I have it. Oh yeah, hold on one sec. This is a good book on CBT, very user-friendly. I think this is helpful. It's called Cognitive Behavioral Therapy Made Simple by Seth Gillihan. Yeah, I think that's a good one.
Okay. So listening to your sushi story and the late night meal you showed, do you at times purposely dose for fat and protein? I may have missed you say that. So say if you were eating just a protein fat meal, you know, you not having anything else with your dinner other than your whatever, how would you dose for that?
I would take 1 or 2 units. If I'm eating like a monster, piece of salmon and a bunch of veggies, like that's probably like 1 or 2 units. It's funny, like I'm just not, I think sometimes my approach can give the impression of like scientific precision or like I'm just an engineer. And it's kind of the opposite. If like for me, it's like I just want to do things that don't require that, because then I'll make less mistakes, then it's less effort. And so yeah, I would just say it's like, it's probably 1 or 2 units. And it's rare that I eat something. And because I wear closed loop now, like I think that helps a little bit, because with loop, at least I can kind of set the absorption time of the carbs. So that does help, but it doesn't help like in a 10x better way. It's like, for me, it's like 20% better, which is great. And helpful overnight for sure. But yeah, I'm not hyper precision person.
Yeah, well, that sounds good to me. Working in pediatrics, our teens often experience burnout. Since you were diagnosed as a teen, was there anything you wished that educators or endos did differently?
Ooh.
So this is a teen in today's time. So we have better technology than 20 years ago. So what could educators or endos do differently to help a teenager who's burning out?
I think it's a lot of the stuff I shared in the mindset section, actually, just about the 42 factors. I think this idea that the CGM data is information. It's not judgments on you as a person. I think that's super important. Oh, I'm getting goosebumps just saying it. I think it's funny. I did a support group once, and there was a teen in there who was wearing the MiniMed 670G and Freestyle Libre. Ooh. So like multiple CGMs and closed loop. And gosh, I just wanted to like tell her to relax a little bit. And I think, when you're that young, it's hard to see, your prefrontal cortex isn't developed, right? So like thinking into the future, like 30 years, like you're going to have this for a long time. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So helping people like live the best that they can with it right now, with the assumption that like, I think being a teenager is the hardest time to have diabetes because of peers, because of hormones, because of trying to be individuating from your parents. Like, it's just like such a cluster of factors. So yeah, I think sometimes we put too much pressure on teens to kind of like be perfect.
Sort of that perfection is the enemy of good.
Totally. Back to the all or nothing mentality. Yeah.
Okay, so here's our last question.
Okay.
Your shirt looks like that multicolored checkerboard graphic. Did you plan that?
I did not, but that is so awesome. Maybe you'll remember something from this presentation because of my shirt.
Yeah. So that's great. Well, we really appreciate you talking to us today. It's so helpful to get that personal perspective. And
Oh,
my takeaway is just we got to look at the big picture. We can't be so focused in
hmm.
on the, you know, right now. Um,
Hmm. The book is free. That's intentional because, I did it in my spare time and we launched it on Diatribe. And I thought, my goal here is to get it to as many people as possible. So it's free to download there. The audiobook is free on YouTube. On Amazon, it's $6, which is the cost pricing. So Diatribe and I don't make any revenue off of that. And we just want it to be accessible. You can get on the Diatribe email list at that link. That's also free. And yeah, just, if I could leave you with two takeaways, I think one is just remember this, to not forget about bright spots. Everyone has strengths. Everyone has things that are working, even if they're small. And the other is don't forget about how complicated it is to live with this disease, and remind your patients of that, because I think that can get lost sometimes. You're welcome to email me at this address. I don't check it that often, but I do check it. And yeah, those are the links for Diatribe.